Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the Sons of a Pitch and American Soccer podcast. I'm your host, Nick Pateras, joined via Skype by my good friend and fellow host, Mike Guglielmi. Mike, how you doing tonight?
Hey, I'm doing good. Just got back from Miami. So nice to be back in the freezing cold, wet, soggy, slippery weather of Chicago. Just to leave again Wednesday morning and drive back down to Florida in the RV with the family on a vacation.
So you're going down, you're scouting Inter Miami, you're checking out their roster moves. I take it that's what you'll be doing, right?
Yeah, I actually had an interview with David Beckham. He was meeting with Zlatan's representatives, as well as Lionel Messi, Neymar, and Cristiano Ronaldo. And I'm just kidding. Let me stop. I'm humoring myself more than I'm humoring you guys.
Well, you sound like any good soccer tabloid, and those have been the headlines as of late. So, yeah, I'm sure a few of our listeners are probably like, oh, yeah, that's interesting stuff, because so many people online have fallen for that. Speaking of online, if you want to join our conversation, if you want to feed some more rumors to Mike, follow us on Twitter at SOP Soccer, on Facebook at Sons of a Pitch Soccer, also on YouTube. Search for Sons of a Pitch Soccer, and shoot us an email, podcast@sonsofapitchsoccer.com. We want to thank Sean Bishop for subscribing on YouTube. Sean, we will be releasing a few more videos over the next couple weeks once Mike gets back from his vacation. And also we want to give a shout out to the I Believe podcast. USMNT focused podcast, brand spanking new. They are, I think, recording their third episode this week. So go out, find them at I Believe on Twitter, and I know they're on Spotify. So look them up, give them some feedback, how they can improve their show. But it's always great to see the conversation around American soccer growing. Also, Mike, it's the holiday season. What kind of gifts should our listeners get?
You know, our listeners should buy any type of Sons of a Pitch swag, whether it's T-shirts, hoodies, phone cases, bath mats. I don't care what it is. They should be buying Sons of a Pitch swag from our Redbubble shop. That address, you can find it at sonsofapitch.redbubble.com. Get on there and help support Sons of a Pitch Soccer podcast. And help us grow the conversation of the soccer in the United States of America. I know that everybody on my list will be getting Sons of a Pitch stuff. My kids are actually really excited about it. They're like, Dad, your logo is on everything. That's so cool. I want that. Can I ask Santa for that? I'm like, you sure can.
His little elves are working overtime for all the SOP gear that we'll be peddling. I'm looking forward to it. You got it. Well, that's all the formalities. Let's dive right into our headlines, and then in the second half of the show, we are going to get into a little bit more of international soccer, Nations League type stuff. But first of all, we want to remind our bracket challenge winner, the MLS Cup playoffs bracket challenge winner, QN Sound 1 is the entry. Ross, shoot us a message or an email. Let us know your details so we can get you your prizes. And thanks to everyone who played this year. We went up from like a dozen people last year to almost 50 this year, so we're going to keep growing that little challenge that we put on every year. Also, I want to give a quick shout out to the Loyola University men's soccer team. Loyola University here in Chicago, they won the Midwest Valley tournament. They're going to the NCAA tournament, so congrats to a local soccer team who is making waves in the college landscape. But now let's get into the meat and potatoes of the show. The American conversation, the MLS conversation. Tomorrow night, Tuesday night, is the expansion draft. And they are all sorts of players who are available from all the teams around the league just about. Nashville and Miami are going to be selecting players from the current rosters to bolster their lineups. Miami gets the first pick, Nashville gets the second pick, and so on and so forth. So what I wanted to do, Mike, is first give a little breakdown of the two rosters, and then maybe we can run down who's available and see where you think these teams might be picking. So I wanted to look at Miami's roster first. They have a handful of players. The biggest names right now, Jay Chapman, recently acquired from Toronto, one of your guys, Mike, who you know well. and Matthias
Yeah,
Pellegrini.
they've got a couple homegrown guys that have come through. One most recently in Jay Chapman. They picked up a couple of homegrowns from Chicago and Vancouver. From
Yeah,
Chicago
and
and Vancouver.
Yeah, and Matthias Pellegrini just signed from Argentina as their first designated player. He looks to be like an immediate impact kind of guy for them. Also, Victor Ulloa from FC Cincinnati, David Norman Jr., Grant Lillard, Jeremy Kieswater, former U.S. youth international. I believe he was playing over in Germany, and he is now on Inter Miami. So they're starting to fill out their roster a little bit. More attacking, I think. And do you find Jay Chapman to be more of a defensive midfielder, or do you think he's more of an offensive type of player?
No, he's definitely an offensive type of player. Probably his best position would be that kind of central attacking midfielder. Maybe could push out to the wings a little bit, but he's definitely more offensive than defensive. But do I really think he's going to lead the CAM spot for Inter Miami? Probably not, but definitely a good depth piece.
So Miami definitely leaning offensive at the current time. Now Nashville's got a few names that we all know, like David Akam, Anibal Godoy, Dax McCarty, who they picked up from Chicago recently, Hani Mukhtar, their first designated player coming over from Germany, and as well as they recently picked up Dave Romney, a defender from the Galaxy, who is more of a depth piece for LA and probably going to be more of the same for Nashville. They also have Daniel Rios, a forward from Mexico. So they're kind of building just kind of some pieces, it looks like right now. And I'm really not sure what Nashville is trying to emphasize at this point. Mike, what's your take on Nashville's current roster setup, and who might they be? What kind of player might they be looking for in the expansion draft?
MLS experience, so to say.
Hey, Mike.
Hey, go ahead and hit pause and record.
So, Mike, it looks like Nashville's just kind of collecting pieces, whereas Miami has a bit more of an attack-minded focus. What do you think Nashville is trying to do? What are they trying to build, and what are their targets in the expansion draft?
I think they're really just building up those MLS veteran pieces, with David Akam, some other names as well.
Yeah, Dax
Anibal
McCarty is that
Godoy,
veteran guy
Dax
for
McCarty.
sure.
Right, exactly. Someone who's, he's captained teams in MLS. He's played in MLS for, 10 plus years. So I think they're kind of building that base, and they've brought in that splashy DP signing. And maybe not splashy with Hani Mukhtar, but a good, bigger name player, so to say. And I think in the expansion draft, I think they're going to be looking for, possibly to bring in one or two bigger names from MLS, but really just depth pieces, maybe something they can move for a little bit of money, or GAM or TAM, or however you want to say it.
So that being said, let's take a look at some of the players available in this expansion draft. And listeners, don't get too nervous. Hopefully, some of your favorite players on your favorite teams will get protected by your GMs and your management staff. But just as a quick recap, Dallas, DC, Houston, the Red Bulls, and Vancouver all had players taken by FC Cincinnati last year, so the league has prohibited any players from those five teams to be drafted by Miami or Nashville this year. So there's 5 rounds, and it's like any draft, you're on the clock. There's no timeouts, no trades during the draft, anything like that, and you only get one player from each club. So once a club has a player selected, then their roster is locked. Everyone else is safe. So that being said, I think is kind of a jumping off point. We had an article by Greg Seltzer on MLSsoccer.com, and his kind of predictions are that Miami takes Brandon Vasquez from Atlanta and Nashville takes Sebastian Ibeagha from New York City with their first picks. And then in the second round, Miami takes Luis Argudo from Columbus, and Nashville takes Mohamed El Munir from LAFC. And then other players selected: Gideon Zelalem, Alvis Powell, Olivier Mbazio, Abu Danladi, Evan Bush, Harry Shipp. Like, these are names that we all know as MLS fans. Maybe not some of the biggest names on these rosters. Like, you could go out and get a Florentine Pogba from Atlanta if you wanted. You could go out and get Justin Miram. Looking at Chicago, like, technically Nemanja Nikolic is still available, even though he's not with the team. Gaetan, Marcelo, these guys are available. Who are some of the teams that finished really well out there? LAFC. You can go pick up Beitashour if you wanted to. You can go get Lee Win if you really think he can help build your team. Meanwhile, the other side of LA, Chris Pontius is still out there. Juninho, Uriel Antuna, like, these are guys available. So, Mike, looking at some of these rosters, looking at some of these guys out here, like, is there one guy you would jump at? Like, if there's someone in the MLS right now that you're like, this guy's got to be on my team, like, who would you go out there and get?
Man, it's a really tough question because it really just depends on what the standpoint is from the team that's drafting to say, is this where we're going for the big name? Is this where we're going for somebody with good market value where we might pay a decent salary and then flip? Is this somebody that is really going to build the team? It really just depends on those factors. As far as, from what I've seen out of the list of players, what I would be going for as a GM is somebody who's been around the league that has that MLS experience. And it's funny because both of these teams, Nashville more so, has had more of those types of signings. So that might not be what they're going for, but somebody like Harry Shipp from Seattle. This is a guy who is going to be a good depth piece. He's proven over his career to really make a difference in games when he comes in. The guy was a stud when he was playing for the Chicago Fire back probably 4 or 5 years ago, and it was mind-boggling that they let him go. And ever since then, he's kind of played that super sub role. He came in and he's been kind of a depth piece during the Gold Cup break, et cetera, et cetera. That's somebody that I know I would want on my team that's been around, that's had different types of roles on different squads and could really adjust well to the expansion setting. So that's somebody that kind of jumps out at me. How about you? What would you be your first pick there, Nick?
I like your analysis of, Nashville has kind of got some veterans. Maybe Miami needs to go that route. And just kind of looking at New England's Juan Agudelo or Kellen Rowe, even from Real Salt Lake, those guys have been around the league. They've had varying degrees of success, but have been on the better half of the spectrum. So I think guys like that might be some solid selections. I don't know if the Revs are going to end up protecting Agudelo. I think they use their protections on Charles Gill and a couple of their other players. So those, I think, are very real possibilities for guys to be selected and come give some stability and guidance and kind of say, hey, this is how the MLS works to a Miami team. But if you are Nashville, you need a goal scorer up there alongside Hani Mukhtar. That's been the name of the game in this league. You got to score goals. You got to have a dual threat. You can't, because we all saw with the LA Galaxy, if all you have is Zlatan, well, as long as he doesn't get the ball, you can't do anything. And teams were able to shut him down by shutting down the distribution to him. That being said, here's a crazy thing out there, Mike. Here's a crazy idea. Go get Dairon Asprilla from Portland, the guy who shows up in all the playoff matches for the Timbers. Go make him your regular everyday starter and just see what happens. Crazy idea, I know, but we love storylines in the MLS. We love the ridiculousness of stuff like that. So I think that would be something that could kind of shake things up a little bit. Is there anyone on your TFC squad that you would be kind of upset to lose? Like, looking at some of these players who are available, like Benazet, Zavaleta, Morrow, Moore, these are all guys who played roles in TFC. Would you be worried about losing any of them?
There's two guys that I'm a little bit worried about losing. One is Nicolas Benazet. He's a TAM player. I think that's not going to scare off either of these clubs. I don't think either one of them is going to go for that kind of Minnesota United build where it's a real slow build in the beginning. So Nicolas Benazet, he really performed in the playoffs. He is an integral part of that TFC squad. So that scares me as well as Justin Morrow. Although there are some positives from Justin Morrow's standpoint. If he was to move on, he does have a high salary because he's been in the league so long, and he seems to be a bit on the downslide as far as his potential in his career. I think he's probably starting to get worse every season instead of better, and but I wouldn't want to lose him as of right now. But those are two great pickups that a team could get. Gonna have to pay for them though. They don't come cheap. But now what I would really love to see get picked off Toronto FC, Patrick Mullins. Please take the guy off our hands.
Why, Mike? What's wrong with Patrick Mullins? He's everyone's crowd favorite, right? The fans love him.
No.
A couple other interesting things to note. Speaking of Minnesota, they had a much improved defense this year, but you've still got Ethan Finley, who is available to be swiped up in this draft as well. And Evan Bush, the Montreal Impact goalkeeper, a lot of people are saying that, he is a solid piece that Montreal could have flipped and maybe got something in return for, either in a transfer or a trade. He's not protected. So Greg Seltzer of MLSsoccer.com has him going in the expansion draft. Wouldn't surprise me one bit there, because we all know that as important as goal scoring is, goalkeeping and locking down that defensive line is also important in today's league. So wouldn't surprise me if Evan Bush moves. Mike, any final thoughts on the expansion draft before we get into some other league headlines?
Yeah, to touch on Evan Bush, I mean, this is a guy, you kind of look at MLS goalkeeping as a whole, there's nothing that really stands out. Like, nobody's signing a DP goaltender. I think Philly tried that once when a guy had a hot World Cup, and that failed miserably. So you just want that steady presence back there as far as an MLS goalkeeper goes. And Evan Bush really fits that standpoint. So I think you might see him get picked up by one of the squads. Other than that, on the expansion draft, it'll be interesting to see how these teams play it out. Are they going for the big names? Are they going for the depth pieces? Are they going for guys they can flip? That's what I'm interested to see when I watch this draft tomorrow night on Tuesday night. And, of course, to see who from Toronto FC, if anybody, gets selected.
Yeah, you're right. That's one thing that we should probably talk about for another minute or so is we've seen it the last few expansion teams. They're not drafting players to use them as starters, but to use them as assets. For trade value, to acquire TAM and GAM. Like, since there's only a limited amount of allocation money every year, this is almost free money. You bring this player in and then just turn around and sell them right back to another team probably. So a great way to increase your cash flow that if you so choose to use it that way. So
absolutely.
Diving into a few more headlines, there are a couple big names have made some moves around the MLS. First of all, a coaching move by the Montreal Impact. We were sad to see Wilmer Cabrera leave after guiding them to a Canadian championship. By the way, there's your Wilmer Cabrera trivia, the only coach to win U.S. Open Cup and Canadian Championship. And he did it in back-to-back seasons, by the way. But he was out. He was just there, I think, on an interim basis or a tryout basis, I guess. And in comes none other than Thierry Henry. Now, Mike, you know a little bit more about this guy from your fandom. Like, what was your impression in hearing that he is back to coach the Impact?
I don't know. I don't know how this guy is as a coach, as a player. There's no question he was one of the best ever, to ever play the game of soccer. So as far as that goes, obviously the guy has some type of strong influence on the game. Now, the only thing that I have heard is that he started as a coach for Monaco over in Ligue 1 in France, and it did not go so hot. So, you have a guy like Patrick Vieira as well, was kind of in that same generation of French players, started in MLS, did well, now moved on to France, and I'm not exactly sure how he's doing with France, if he's even still, I believe it was Nice. I don't know how they say it, but I'm not even sure if he's still coaching over there, but he did well in the MLS landscape. Now, Thierry Henry understands MLS, so you're not going to run into an issue like Adome Torrent, who is pissed off that he can't sign whoever he wants whenever he wants because he has to play with the rules of the DPs and the salary caps and the travel and all that kind of stuff. So it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. I think he will do okay. I don't know about the management aspect from Montreal has been very interesting as far as the upper management with Joey Saputo, who also owns Bologna over in Serie A. This is a guy who likes to put a big imprint on his squad. He's an owner that really is involved in the game, and I think that might hurt whoever is coaching now, Thierry Henry. So I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see how this plays out, but you cannot argue with this guy's pedigree. He has done everything in the world of soccer. He's won a World Cup of the national team. He's won, trophy after trophy after trophy over in Europe. Came over, played for the Red Bulls, kind of was in that initial start of the big name players like David Beckham, kind of followed David Beckham into MLS, and he produced. He did well. He played extremely well here for the Red Bulls. So I'm interested to see how it plays out. I really can't say one way or the other to jump off right now, but just because it's the Impact, if I had to choose one, I'm going to say he's going to suck. The Impact are going to suck, and that's just how it's going to go.
Yeah, it's really going to come down to the talent that they have on their roster. I mean, if Thierry Henry is the greatest coach in MLS history, I still don't see Montreal competing on the pitch with LAFC, Portland, Seattle, and maybe even a couple other teams.
Right.
In the West, and then if you're looking in the East, like there's still a talent gap between Montreal and New York, Atlanta, and to a degree Philly, depending on how they continue to develop their team and who they sign. So you've still got this upper echelon of MLS clubs that Montreal is nowhere near from a talent perspective. Maybe he gets them into the playoffs. Maybe he's able to help them develop with their I can't even say it right now, Champions League. That's it. Having won the Canadian Championship last year, Montreal is in the Champions League. So that gives him a longer preseason, if he wants to treat it as such, to help develop his team. And from what I've been reading, like he's been really well received by the players on the teams he's coached. Arsenal youth team, all the players loved him. He was an assistant in Belgium for a few years, and Romelu Lukaku, the Belgian star striker, said that Henry really helped him develop his game. And then, unfortunately, he just didn't have the talent at Monaco to really compete with some of the other French teams, and now he's with Montreal. The only thing that kind of concerns me is I heard a quote from him like, I'm ready to like rejuvenate or restart my coaching career here in the MLS. So I don't know if it means he's going to be here long term or if he's even got confidence in himself after being kicked out of Monaco midway through his first year after signing a 3-year deal. So we'll see. But you're right. There's no doubting his pedigree, and there's definitely no doubt the guy knows how to coach talented players. Let's just see if Montreal gets him those talented players.
Right, and that's been kind of the issue for Joey Saputo is he's always kind of gone after the bigger names. He's gone after the Italian superstar, so to say, and not necessarily the actual team itself. And I think that's something that's been a downplay for Montreal. But one thing that I do know with Thierry Henry is you're going to have guys who are going to sign to be excited to play for a guy like that, just because he has such a known pedigree of being a player in the sport. And, I can see the players definitely being like, you know what, I'm going to go out there and give it my all for this guy regardless. And he might bring in some other decent name players, so to say. So it'll be interesting to see how the Impact roll throughout the 2020 season.
So, Mike, real quick, bad hire, good hire, great hire. What do you think?
Good hire, one, just because it's going to get people excited, especially with the French connection there in Montreal. You have a very, very high population of French immigrants, and you're going to you're going to get extra seats sold because of that hire. Just to see Thierry Henry and just to see him coach, just based off of that pedigree. So, look, that right there just puts it into a good hire. Now, if he bombs out in the first half of the season and he's, they're sitting in 10th place in the Eastern Conference, then maybe they move on. Maybe it won't work out. But I think regardless, he's got that start on his side, and I think it's going to be a good hire. I think in the League of MLS and the coaching, because he's familiar with the league, he understands the DP rules, he understands the travel, he understands those types of things. I think that will help him in the long run.
Absolutely. He's got to get at least 1 year. I don't see them firing him. No matter how bad 2020 goes, I don't see him getting any less than 1 year. And again, it'll get back to the player development. If he can get Montreal into the playoffs, then shoot, they'll probably give him an extension. Let's be honest, considering the way the franchise has been recently. But yeah, he's going to have time to work with these players, and maybe it's even a good sign if they're thinking about doing some academy or youth work that they've got Thierry Henry there with them. The other big MLS headline comes from Portland and their player Brian Fernandez. The Timbers have parted ways and released Brian Fernandez, their kind of star striker. I'll say it that way because he came into the league from Liga MX, just scoring goals left and right, immediate impact, was that X factor, everything that Portland had been missing in their game, everything that Savarese wanted to do with the Portland style of play. Brian Fernandez embodied that. And then he kind of flamed out towards the end of the season, ended up going into the substance abuse program, I believe, and now they've parted ways with him. So it was a fast fall from grace for Brian Fernandez. Mike, what do you know about the story and what happened?
I don't know a ton about it, but look, this guy was a great signing. I mean, he came in, he was scoring goals left and right, kind of rejuvenated Portland after that strong losing streak that they had in the beginning of the season, which was partly based on the fact that they were out of Providence Park for the first 10 or 11 games of the season or whatever it was. But this guy came in and he changed that team. He really gave them an attacking threat that Ebobisi couldn't. And then all of a sudden it was like this guy who was scoring tons of goals just wasn't getting it done anymore. And of course, from a fan standpoint, you think, well, it's just kind of the slump, right? He came in hot. Now teams are starting to figure him out. He's going through a little bit of a slump. And then this whole news came out that he was going through the substance abuse program. And it's understandable why he started to falter from there. Obviously, he had some issues in that program and could not continue. Probably, my guess is a relapse or multiple relapses. So that's kind of, from that standpoint, it's crappy to see a human being going through that. And, we really wish him the best. Maybe this is the best thing for him, right? He gets released. He can focus on his personal life. But again, that's kind of, a rough spot to be in. You're going through that type of mental, push back and forth with the issues that you're having there, and then you get dropped and you don't have a contract. So that might not help, but hopefully from a fan standpoint, from a broadcasting standpoint, so to say, hopefully he gets better. And obviously the man has the talent that can really do well in any league, I think, at least in North America, let alone probably half of the world, if not more. So hopefully he gets better, and we'll see. Now, where do the Timbers go from here?
Well, that's the question, right? With his contract being terminated, that's the exact phrase of it. The league terminated his contract and removed him from the roster. People are speculating, well, now we got an extra DP slot. We can bring back Valeri. We could bring back someone else to play alongside Diego Valeri now and have a couple more stars and just keep it rolling and get back to MLS Cup finals and win some more trophies. It's that simple, isn't it, Mike? You just go sign another DP to fill his place.
Yeah, it's just that simple.
Yeah, no, that seems pretty optimistic from what I've been reading about it. Like, they really hit They really hit the nail on the head with Fernandez. He was like the third leading scorer in Liga MX playing for Necaxa, and able to steal him up from south of the border there. Like, that was such a great finding. I doubt they'll be able to replicate that.
No, I highly doubt it. I mean, Valeri, from everything that I've seen, it looks like he's pretty much done. So they're not going to re-sign him. They've got to find something from an attacking standpoint. And as we know from watching this league for years upon years upon years, it's really hard to hit the nail on the head like they did with Fernandez. Unfortunately, it just didn't work out.
Yeah, so we'll see how they move some more pieces and what are the other things they kind of do in the offseason. Maybe that'll give us a hint. But right now, it wouldn't surprise me if they went into complete rebuild, or at the same time, if they tried to make one more push for one more season. I really thought that they were going to be fighting for the Western Conference Championship this year. Then again, I also picked Sporting Kansas City to win the Western Conference, so that tells you where my head was at the beginning of the season. But we'll see. We'll see what Portland wants to do. What would you do, Mike? Would you go for it, or would you just say, forget it, this is too much, let's rebuild?
They've kind of been in that spot to rebuild over, the past year and a half, maybe even going back into their MLS Cup run. It was kind of like that last hope, that last gasp. It might be time with the issues they've had with Valeri. They just lost Liam Ridgewell, was one of their DPs and the center back. Maybe it's time to rebuild. That fan base isn't going anywhere as long as you can get something done fairly quickly. You can't go through a Chicago Cubs rebuild where you suck for the next 6 years. But of course, that's a different sport and a different league. But if I was the GM of Portland, we just did the stadium renovation. People are going to show up. We have the base. Let's kind of put out a good game plan there and rebuild over the next year to 2 years and try and get a big-time winner back out on the field.
And here's the other thing. Your biggest rival, Seattle, just won MLS Cup. You got to do something. I think that is going to play into Portland's ownership and management, whether they want to admit it or not, that Seattle has done everything right from the moment they joined MLS. 11 straight playoff appearances, 2 MLS Cups, and a third MLS Cup appearance. Like, Portland has to do something to set pace, to keep up with the Seattle Sounders. Seattle Sounders have proven themselves the class of the Western Conference, and Portland's got to do something there. So with that, go ahead, Brody. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, look, they're just behind Seattle from that standpoint, but Seattle's won 2 cups to Portland's 1. I don't think that really plays into the decision making at all. I think you have to do what's best for your squad and your franchise overall. And if you keep trying to just find that one piece to kind of put you in play, should Portland really have represented the Western Conference against Atlanta back in 2018? Probably not.
Yeah, well, they won the games. They won those playoff
Seattle was
games.
They did. They won the games. I'll give them that. But that was 90 minutes. That wasn't over the span of a season. So, I would take the standpoint of let's stop, rebuild, and get things, right the ship. Get everything put together and bring in a new core of DP players that can lead this team for the next 4 or 5 years. And even if Portland wins MLS Cup next year, are they going to be on the same level as Seattle? No. So don't even worry about that. Just move forward, and however that has to be done, do it.
Well, with that, we are going to go into halftime and hear a word from our sponsors. On the flip side, we're going to recap U.S. versus Canada and then talk a little bit of Concacaf, Nations League, take a deep dive into exactly what the Nations League format is and what the new FIFA ranking system is and how it all ties in to the World Cup qualifying. So stay tuned. Well, welcome back to the second half of the show. As the Sons of a Pitch are going international, we are going to recap the U.S. versus Canada game, the second leg of their Nations League fixtures. And this time it was all United States. If you remember the first game up in Toronto, Canada pulled off a 2-0 stunner, or as our French-Canadian friends have been calling it, 2-0, to play off the obvious USA-Mexico 2-0 win. But man, the U.S. had no rhythm, had no flow, had no offense. The defense looked shaky. Canada controlled the midfield and ended up with a 2-0 victory. This game, complete opposite. Mike, what did you see? What were your impressions watching this game?
Much different. I mean, this was all USA. It was a complete and utter breakdown of Canada right from the get-go. I'm torn. I like to see the U.S. men's national team win games. Now, at the expense of Canada as being a TFC supporter, and I want to see Canada in a World Cup before 2026 when they host, I'm a little bit disappointed in the result. But this was all USA right from the start. Jordan Morris gets a goal 2 minutes in, the second minute, with an assist from Serginho Dest, the guy who made the prediction before the game that I guarantee we're going to win this game. A much different game. Zardes, look at when these lineups came out. When these lineups came out, Twitter was going nuts, of course, again. Oh, what are they doing starting this guy over that guy? Where's Sargent? Where is this? It's going to be another miserable USA game, and it was not. This team came out hungry against the Canada team who knew they had to win this game in order to get into the Hex, because if they didn't win, if they drew or lost, it was going to be hard for Canada to get in. So again, Canada kind of had the mantra of, this was our cup final against the U.S. in Toronto at BMO Field, and they showed that. This game, the USA came out and really was playing for their coach's job, essentially, because I'll tell you right now, if Canada won this game, Berhalter wasn't getting through. So it was good to see the U.S. show up and really dominate this game from that standpoint. So in which they did. Morris with the first goal right there, right in the beginning of the game, really changed the tone up. And then Zardes in the 23rd minute. Aaron Long with a beautiful header from Tim Ream in the 34th minute. At that point, it was all but done and dusted.
Yeah, and let's get back to Serginho Dest real quick. He made that prediction, like, oh, we're definitely going to win this game. And, like, people were giving him a hard time for it, like, all over social media and in the media. Like, people were calling him cocky. People were saying, you don't know, you're not that good, blah, blah, blah. You're this young kid. Like, I think it's ridiculous, man. Like, he's 18, 19, and he comes out and he says, yeah, our team is definitely going to win. Well, what do you expect a professional athlete to say at this point? I think it's stupid to make it a bigger deal than it is. Like, oh, he's disrespecting Canada in his second American appearance, blah, blah. No, that's not it. A player comes out and says we're definitely going to win. And here's the thing. He backed it up. He had a really good game. Some of his defense is still shaky, but that's youth and amateurism, I guess, not having experience. But he had a pretty good game, and like you said, he assisted on the first goal. So I think he backed up his talk. So I think that issue can just be put to bed, and no one has to question Serginho Dest's desire and confidence.
Look, exactly. I mean, this is a guy who, when this game happened in Toronto back a month ago, this was a guy who was not on the squad because he hadn't made that decision yet to come to play for the U.S. men's national team or to play for the Dutch national team. And you know what? I want to see that. I want to see that out of a player. This guy's excited. He came over. He made the decision to play for the U.S. men's national team. Well, he had looks and offers from one of the biggest clubs in the world in the Netherlands who have played World Cup finals. And he chose the U.S. The fact that he comes out and he's that pumped for this game and says, you know what, we're going to win. We will take this game. I will do everything in my power, and I know my teammates will be right there behind us. And that's great to see. I'm really excited that that he's that pumped for that, and he's not just, well, I picked the U.S. because I know I'll get playing time there.
Right. So my kind of take on this was, after the last game, everyone was like, wow, the U.S. has a long way to go. They're nowhere near where we thought they were. And then after this game, you say the same about Canada. Like, oh, man, maybe that U.S. game was the outlier, and we need to learn how to play several games in a row. That Cuba game was just kind of a cupcake, so to speak. It's funny to see both U.S. and Canada with such high hopes and such young talent, and both of them going, yeah, we're nowhere near where we need to be. So it was a good wake-up call for both teams. As far as the actual gameplay, to me it looked a little sloppy. Like there wasn't much good possession, wasn't much good tactical type of development, I guess. The defenses on both sides were pretty shaky, but at the end of the day, and we've said this about the U.S., you just need to win games. You just got to start putting some W's together, build a little confidence, score a few goals, and maybe have something that you can work with. Personally, I was happy to see that Berhalter allowed them to play some long balls over the top and try and take advantage of the Canadian defense that way. And at one point, I think Canada was just ball watching, and it took 3 passes, I think, from the U.S.'s own 18 before I think it was the second or third goal that was scored. It was Zardis's 89th minute goal. That was the one, the fourth one. Okay. Like it was like 3 passes from the back. It was long ball. It was over the top. This was not build from the back type of play. Hey, maybe the players went rogue and just said, yeah, forget whatever Berhalter said. We're up 3-1. Let's have some fun. Totally possible now. We saw, I think Pulisic did that in some other games too, where he would just get the ball in the midfield and just charge straight ahead and not try to do any link play or any sort of overload passing, whatever you want to call it. So it was good to see that. What really stood out to me and just had me laughing, first of all, U.S. soccer fans, I think I just have to stop listening to anyone and just only form my own opinions, because U.S. soccer fans are never, ever happy. I think we just have to admit that as a fact, because here we have these lineups, and we've got Serginho Dest starting, Jonathan Brooks starting, Jackson Ewell starting. Like, you didn't have Will Trapp and you didn't have Michael Bradley as your defensive midfielder. You had Jackson Ewell doing that, winning balls in the midfield. And what's the first thing they say? Well, Josh Sargent should be starting. We hate Jesse Zardes. Yeah, Zardes had 2 goals and an assist. Oh, great. DeAndre Yedlin. Nobody likes him. Yeah, he had an assist in this game off the bench in what, like maybe 15 minutes of play or something like that after an excellent game for Newcastle. It just cracked me up that the 2 biggest focuses of roster hate produced in this game against Canada. It really just made my day, and not many people had much to say about Zardes after that game.
Not at all. Look, that's what's going to happen, right? You get a team like the United States men's national team. They overperformed back in 2002, making the quarterfinals in the World Cup in South Korea and Japan. And ever since that point, they kind of the expectations went super high. And you can have expectations for club teams. They go season by season. This is a national team, which is going to go cycle by cycle, which is 4 times longer than a season. So you're going to have those expectations, and then that ultimate crash, and everybody's just kind of going nuts from that standpoint. I think that the fans are not going to be happy, especially when you've got it's the United States, right? We should be higher. We should be better. That is the mentality of every American out there. So it is what it is. We're in this spot. We have to continue to fight and grow, and we have a lot of young talent. We have a new leadership as far as coaching goes. Take the bumps in the road as they go. This game didn't really mean anything from a grand standpoint. The United States is going to get in the hex. It doesn't matter. Chill out. It's the Nations League. You beat Canada. Now you get to move on to the Nations League, which is this brand new league, and something that's never been done before. You're going to move on to the finals of that to face Mexico, and then we can all bitch, whine, and complain about how poorly they play against Mexico and Costa Rica and that portion of it. Just relax. It is what it is. Focus on the big picture and the growth of this team going over the span of this cycle.
Yeah, well, let's talk about the big picture then, Mike. I mean, personally, I'm like, hey, let's just take the win and be happy about it and not give it a second thought because that's really all I can take at this point, both emotionally and physically when I'm watching these games. But you want to talk big picture. Look at the possession. If Berhalter really wants a possession-based system, something he can try to play from and build out the back, possession in this game, 36% U.S., 64% Canada. Like, I didn't think Canada was built as a possession team either. So I think there's your big picture kind of. If you want to make us think about something, then you need to make us think about how even against in a meaningless game against a bad Canadian performance, you still only had 36% possession.
I'm going to just take that and shoot it right down. The fact that they were up 3-0 in the 34th minute, they don't need the whole possession. Canada changed their game plan. They had to attack like crazy. They had to control the play from that point going forward, and the U.S. could sit back and take care of that 3-0 lead, which they finished off into a 4-1 victory. So possession in this game, I really watched the first half, and at that point I just turned it off and went to sleep. And Canada was dominated in every facet of the game by the USMNT in that first 45 minutes. So, okay, possession ended up with a 64-36. It ended up 4-1. It was a 1-1 second half. It happens when you change the complexion of a game. And that's exactly what happened here. I wouldn't look into it too much.
Okay, I think that's a very fair point there, Mike. And a couple of things you got to remember too, though, is the finishing ability of the players on this. I think we had 2 goals off set pieces, 2 or 3 goals off set pieces. Zardis's final goal was a beautiful strike. I mean, I don't think he'll ever be that wide open against better competition, but you can't argue the finishing ability. Now, you said too, Canada had this great spell of possession that they were attacking, they were throwing players forward. Does that mean the U.S. defense held really well? Like, I was impressed with Aaron Long and John Brooks in this game.
Yeah, from what I watched in the first half, John Brooks had a great game. He was definitely a dominating presence back there in the center, and I was like, we're not getting around this guy. He's playing well, so he definitely had a great performance. Other than that, it's just Canada. I mean, again, it's Canada, man. Like, this is the team who had a good run back in the early 2000s, won that Gold Cup somehow out of some kind of crazy fluke, and then in the 2007 Gold Cup, they were right there with an offside play against the U.S. in Chicago at Soldier Field before I even lived in Chicago. And other than that, Canada's been Canada, man. They're just not a great team. They've got a lot of young talent, yes. Lucas Cavallini is a rising star.
Which, by the way, he had some boneheaded plays in this game too. So if he is going to be that rising star, he's got to get his head straight.
Right. Alphonso Davies from Bayern Munich. The guy's good, but he was playing in the left back position. I understand the formational standpoint that Herdman was going for with trying to push him up that wing a little bit higher. But when you've got a team that has, a decent midfield, it's going to be tough to have this guy in that left back position and win games. He has to be in a midfield position or a winger position at very best to get some production.
Yeah,
so
it looked like he was trying to use him as Bayern uses Davies, where they're just like, here, you got the whole left side of the field.
Right.
Just whatever you want to do. You play defense, you attack, you have the whole left side of the field. So it looked like Herdman was trying to maybe do a little something like that and see if he couldn't take advantage of what Bayern already knows. But I don't think it works in the international game.
It doesn't work when you have 2 center backs in Daniil Henry and Vittoria. I mean, Vittoria is as slow as it gets. I mean, the guy has absolutely no pace. Decent center back. He has the body build. He's strong enough to be a decent center back, but he's extremely slow. Daniil Henry, it's Daniil Henry. I mean, any of the TFC fans that are listening, you remember Daniil Henry and the boneheaded plays that guy had made. He has the raw talent to be something special, And TFC management completely screwed that up when they sold him to Cyprus, and then they sold him to West Ham, and then he went on loan to some other small club, and then he ended up back in MLS with Vancouver, and now he's getting pushed out of Vancouver. The guy's not that good. So when you got Davies, if you have him trying to push up that left wing and kind of overlap Osorio, you're leaving yourself extremely vulnerable from the back, and that's what happened. I mean, these guys got caught out, and when you're playing a team like United States or a Mexico or a Costa Rica or Honduras, one of these clubs that are better in Concacaf, you're gonna get punished for those types of things. So that's all I have to say about that.
Daniil Henry, not very fast, reminded me. I had a coach in one of my youth clubs who he was a Brit, but was in Canada for a time when he was with the Royal Air Force of Canada, and he used to yell at us that we were slower than a dead gazelle whenever we couldn't track back on defense. So that just kind of reminded me of his old phrase that Daniil Henry, slower than a dead gazelle. So with
that would probably be Stephen Vittoria, but Daniil Henry is just clumsy as hell. Yeah.
Okay, so baby giraffe, a baby giraffe and a dead clumsy.
Either way, the center backs for Canada suck. Okay, got it.
And I'm glad the U.S. could finally take advantage of it. And so I think that's our consensus on this game, right? Like, it's a win, good job. Both teams still have a lot of work to do, and fortunately, the Nations League is going to provide them with that opportunity. The U.S. moves on to take on Cuba in their final game Tuesday night, the 19th. Assuming the United States wins, they will win their group in League A of the Nations League. So I want to take this time and kind of recap the Nations League, tell everyone a little bit about it, and take a deeper dive with about the last 10 minutes or so of the show. So the Nations League is the entire Concacaf Confederation. It encompasses every nation and is divided into 3 leagues, League A, B, and C, and then each league has several groups. So League A has 4 groups, each group has 3 teams, and these are your top teams as we're based on the FIFA rankings. So Canada, US, and Cuba in one group, other teams in League A, Mexico, Panama, Honduras, Costa Rica, those are your big teams. And the teams that win their groups move into the semifinal bracket to see who wins the Nations League. The whole reason they started the Nations League was to qualify for the Gold Cup. So if you win your group in League A, you move into the semifinals of the Gold Cup. If you come in second in your group in League A, the top group in the top league in Nations League, then you automatically qualify. And then if you finish third in your group in League A, you're relegated down to League B, and you have to go through a qualifying round to get into the Gold Cup. So there's a lot of incentive to win your Nations League games. And I think it's a great thing because you have all these smaller nations, like in the Caribbean and Central America, who don't get the opportunity to play some of these better teams or play as often during some of the international windows. So to me, I think it's great in that aspect. Would you agree with me, Mike?
Yeah, for sure, because it brings the competitive standpoint up a bit especially from qualifying for a Gold Cup. It was these teams qualified for a Gold Cup, as in USA, Mexico, Canada, Costa Rica, Honduras. All of these teams were in, pretty much guaranteed. And then there was 1 or 2 spots down at the bottom for the French Guineas or, these smaller type teams in CONCACAF to get into the Gold Cup. So now that it's based off of the competition, it does make things a little bit more interesting for these smaller clubs, smaller nations, not clubs, to kind of qualify and get their way into that regional tournament.
Right. So then looking, like you said, French Guiana or French Guinea, they're in League B. They came in second in their group in League B, so they get to move into the first round of qualifying, whereas Grenada, who won Group A of League B, gets bumped up. They get promoted to League A for next year and automatically qualify for the 2021 Gold Cup. So again, a lot of incentive for these smaller teams, smaller nations to move up. The other reason that the Nations League has become so important is because FIFA has flipped their World Cup qualifying from a qualifying tournament to a ranking-based system. So for CONCACAF, for North America, Central America, and the Caribbean, the top 6 FIFA-ranked nations go into the hex and then will play in a tournament to determine who qualifies for the World Cup. So the reason the Nations League is especially important is because FIFA now ranks teams based on formulas, and they get points for winning games and lose points for losing games. And what's interesting is these matches are weighted. So if you're playing a friendly during an international break, it's weighted as like a 10-time multiplier for certain aspects. But if you're playing in, say, your Confederations final match, so if you're in like the Gold Cup finals and qualifiers, then those are like 35 and 40 times the weight of, some regular friendlies. So they weight it differently. You get more points for the better teams that you beat, and you lose less points for losing to better teams, because the assumption is the higher ranked teams are going to win the game. So all of that taken into account now for these CONCACAF nations is going to help them qualify, which is why Canada was so bent on winning their group and bumping up into the top 6. Now they're hanging around Honduras and El Salvador for the 4th, 5th, and 6th spots in CONCACAF's rankings. So I don't know, is that fair? What do you think, Mike? It's the new system. There's always some inherent unfairness to anything that's new, but I think this is great. I think a point system, everyone knows what's going on. Everyone knows where you stand. You know who you got to play. You know who you should try to schedule. I'm all in favor of this, man. I think it's a great idea.
You may feel that way. I do not. This is ridiculous. The fact that it's based off of ranking, it's based off of different weightings, it's based off of different points. No. Play the games. Have World Cup qualifying. That was one of the best parts about World Cup qualifying before this Nations League and UEFA came along, and now CONCACAF and probably all the other confederations. You played a team, and if you beat that team, you move forward. And then you played another team. And if you beat that team, you move forward. And then you played another team. And if you beat that team, you went on. If you lost, you went home. And this is something where, okay, for the United States, Mexico, Costa Rica, it's beautiful. They're in, period. They're in the hex. There's no questions about it. They're high enough ranked. They're going to beat teams that are smaller than them. That's how it goes. But when you're talking about a Canada team who pulled off a huge win against the United States in Canada, 2-0, and then went on and played in Orlando 4-1. So if you go to the 2-leg system, the U.S. still would have won because they did get that away goal, but they did win by 3 in Orlando. So the U.S. still would have moved on, but that would have been just a one-on-one matchup between the USA and Canada. This team, you kind of look at it from the Canadian standpoint, at least I do. This is a team that beat the United States men's national team and will probably not even get into the hex. You're going to have a team like El Salvador who's going to get the shit kicked out of them by the U.S. men's national team, by Mexico, by Costa Rica, by Honduras, all of them, because El Salvador is not that good. If I think if you put Canada against El Salvador in a 2-game playoff, Canada's going to walk through them no problem. So you're going to put a team like that ahead of Canada because they're playing a team like Montserrat, whereas Canada's playing a team like United States. So I think it's unfair from the lower standpoint. I agree with the Nations League and kind of allowing that competition to go between the higher, the teams and kind of having that rating to have certain teams playing certain leagues and up and down, relegation, promotion, whatever. But as far as World Cup qualifying, the fact that it's based off of points and not off of actual results on the field, that's what is a little bit concerning about it from my standpoint. So for me, I'm against it when it comes to World Cup qualifying. I'm for it for the Nations League and not having to schedule friendlies, but not feeling the World Cup qualifying.
It's kind of funny. It's almost like we're rehashing a lot of the arguments for the college football playoff system, or the AP
Yeah.
rankings, and who's determined the national champion before there was a playoff system. So if you look at it from an American college football standpoint, you had these arguments all the time. So that here they institute a playoff. Well, how do you determine who makes the playoff? Your top four ranked teams. So they kind of just went to the college football playoff system. It's kind of an interesting comparison there. And again, you have the same kind of debate going on in college football as now you do in international soccer. Like, what is a fair ranking? But they actually came out with an algorithm. So El Salvador's victory over Montserrat probably earned them more points than Canada lost losing to the United States. Or I should say, earned them less points than Canada lost in losing to the United States, because it was expected for Canada to lose to the U.S., and it was expected for El Salvador to beat Montserrat, who is this minnow of the Concacaf soccer world. So in that aspect, it probably is fair. It's just unfortunate that both of those teams started within a handful of points of each other in the ranking. Canada had 1339 and El Salvador had 1336. So even with that those qualifiers on who they played, El Salvador is going to get the bump up at the next ranking, and Canada is going to be outside of the hex, unfortunately.
Okay, so who did El Salvador play in their last 5 competitive matches here in Nations League?
Let me do a quick look see here, Mike. Let me take a look. But what's your point here when you're saying this?
So my point here is that they're not playing the same type of competition that a team like Canada is playing. So you're playing Montserrat, you're playing all these other smaller teams, and you're not playing against the same competition. It all started off with a base ranking. Now, 10 years down the road, when everything is kind of moved into, how the team has performed in the different leagues that they've been in and whatnot, then it might be a little bit more fair. But the fact where it started out is kind of an issue that it started out based off of some rankings that were just completely bogus, and everybody knows it follows FIFA rankings.
Well, by the way, Montserrat was in a group with El Salvador, the Dominican Republic, and St. Lucia. Montserrat is ranked about where Cuba is. Like, they're within two nations in the CONCACAF rankings of Cuba. So Canada versus Cuba, I'd say, is about the same, if not a better advantage for Canada than El Salvador versus Montserrat. So the difference there was that El Salvador also got to play an extra couple games, because their group had 4 teams, because they are in League B.
So they get a couple. There you go. That's the point I'm trying to make, and that was kind of one of those lawyer questions where you know the answer before you ask the question. I knew they were in League B, and Canada was League A because of where they finished with those qualifiers. The fact that El Salvador is playing a bunch of teams that they should be able to wipe the floor with, if you put Canada in their group in League B, they would win every single game that they were playing in, and would probably finish ahead of El Salvador if they were playing in a league with the United States and Cuba.
But here's the thing now, Canada, no mic drop. I mean, Mike, if you want to drop off this call, then feel free, and I'll finish the show up here. But if Canada ends up coming second in Group A of League A, they automatically qualify for the Gold Cup. They're not in any sort of qualifying round that these League B teams are going to go into. So just by that alone, they get to play in more heavily weighted games and have more opportunities to win in the Gold Cup to bump their rankings up. It's just poor timing at this point for Canada. Same thing being said for the United States. They can bump their rankings up and make sure they are in the hex. Now, I don't know if there's any difference in finishing top 3 versus top 6, if that helps your scheduling in any way, shape, or form. I don't know. But it does kind of suck for those teams that were hovering from 5, 6, 7, 8 in the CONCACAF rankings. But it's just bad timing, I think. And you're right, it'll sort itself out in the next couple of years. I'm pretty sure about that.
It will sort itself out going forward.
a couple of things here to keep in mind since we're looking at at FIFA rankings. Back to the United States, and then we'll wrap things up a little bit here. So the United States is 23rd in FIFA ranking right now, and this was before their game against Canada and before their next game against Cuba. So the 5 teams ahead of them and the 5 teams behind them. Here we go. Sweden, Peru, Senegal, Poland, and the Ukraine are the 5 teams immediately ahead of the United States. And the 5 teams immediately behind the U.S., Wales, Austria, Venezuela, Iran, and Japan. And Iran and Japan are the top 2 Asian Confederation teams. Does that sound about right to you? I feel like the U.S. should be a lot better than that, but yet here we are hanging out with Ukraine and Wales.
Well, based off of recent results, no. They're probably about where they should be as far as where we think they should be. They're probably a little bit better than Poland and Senegal and Peru. For starters, definitely better than Wales, Austria, Venezuela, Iran, and Japan. So I think it's just based off of the current results. They've dropped a bit in the rankings since probably over the last year or so, and duly noted, they should. When you lose to a team like Canada, who's ranked I think like 78th or 67th or something crazy like that, which I think they're rated a little bit below where they should be as well. And some of the other teams that the U.S. has lost to, it probably should. This is a good ranking for me and where they are now. They definitely can get better. Throw in a win over Mexico in the Nations League semifinals or final round, and they should be back up towards the top 10 where we think they should be.
There it is. And yeah, just as a point of reference, Canada is currently at 69th. We expect them to drop closer to 75 after this loss to the U.S., and Mexico is currently 11th in the overall international ranking. So to me, that seems a little high for Mexico, considering they don't win anything outside of North America, but it is what it is at this point. So with that, we want to thank you all for listening. Feel free to join our conversation on social media at SOP Soccer on Twitter, on Facebook at Sons of a Pitch Soccer, or email us podcast@sonsofapitchsoccer.com. Also, we want to thank you to our sponsors, Donovan Food Brokerage and Nice Premium Iceland Pure Spring Water. And let's see, just for kicks and giggles here, Iceland is currently ranked 40th. So Iceland still a better team than Canada. Believe that or not, Mike?
I believe it.
Okay, but most of all, we want to thank you, our listeners. Without you, we don't have the show. We appreciate all you do, all the conversations you have, all the subscribes, the likes. Share us with your friends, share us with your family, and we look forward to talking with you again next week. Thanks, everyone.